I was actually pretty nervous about making this review. Even when I was writing it, I was kind of afraid that this one really doesn't bring the funny as much as I'd like. Some of the stuff I review is kind of easy, like the Red Brown stuff, Strike Commando, and Captain America. There's just ridiculous stuff that happens on screen, or sometimes the game is really obviously unfair or cheap, or there's goofy stuff happening. And with FMV titles, it's usually pretty easy because it's silly. This one is really just crushingly bad because it's mundane, and it's kind of hard to make a joke about the reasons why this game is bad.
I'm often asked what my favorite games are.
That said, Privateer 2 is kind of the reason, one of the main reasons I got into this thing, and it's kind of the whole thesis behind what I'm doing now is, I don't necessarily just choose games or movies because they're bad. I tend to review the games that really kind of defined the my childhood, the games that really frustrated me as a kid because I had a lot of personal experience with this. So, almost all these games I'm mentioning are games I played to death, and I was a big Origin Systems fan. In fact, when I initially wrote this review, I had written about 5 minutes of stuff where I kind of talk about like the console wars and the difference between like a PC gamer and a console gamer. And if you weren't around in that time, which was kind of like the early to mid 90s, there was this big divide. And even late 80s, there was this big divide between PC gamers and console gamers. A lot of people were saying like only one would dominate. You'd only see gaming proceed in the future on like PCs and consoles. People were really threatened by this. If PC gaming is going to continue, consoles will be phased out because PCs were so much powerful. And that was the big argument for PCs, was that you could play games like Privateer on a PC, but the NES and Super Nintendo was kind of limited. On the other hand, with a console, you had guaranteed functionality, or at least in theory. If you put a cartridge in a console, it worked, and it was pretty stable. It was a constant platform for people to develop for, and there was stability there. PCs, on the other hand, were much more powerful, but there's so many different parts to it. So many different types of hardware that can interconnect in so many different ways. It's really a nightmare to design for, and as a result, games are much less stable and harder to get working, especially back in those days, especially when you're working in the days just leading up to Windows 95. This was a DOS game, and when you're dealing with that kind of hardware and somewhat hard to use machines, especially PCs, it was hard to get games working. Especially with the different types of sound cards and some usually very strict hardware requirements. Origin Systems, I used to love their games, but pretty much every time they released a new title, you had to upgrade your PC because your PC was always your PC was almost always insufficient to run the game, at least in the way it was intended. It would tend to be really bad that way. Wing Commanders 3, 4, Bioforge. If you never played that game, you're not missing much. But games like that, every time those come out, you're like, I'll have to buy a new motherboard and PC, new memory. So you got really good at building PCs if you were a fan of PC gaming. But that was the thing. Like a console gamer, you made this. All you had to do was buy the game, put it in. You didn't have to have a fucking degree in computer science to play these games, and that was PC gamers would say that. Oh, you're kind of making my argument for me. You have to be intelligent, and intelligent people like PC games. And so I wrote this whole thing, basically the whole speech I'm telling you now, as this big preface to the game, and I realized all of a sudden I was like 12 minutes into the review and I hadn't started talking about Privateer 2 yet, so I really had to get moving with Privateer 2. And besides that, the whole conversation about the console wars was really peripheral anyway. You didn't need to know this stuff, and it wasn't funny, which is why I'm telling you now. But this game, like I said, the big problem with Privateer 2 was it didn't work at all. And even trying to get footage for this was one of the more grotesque nightmares of getting footage I've ever had for experience. And usually PC games, I don't even worry about anymore. Like PC games, when I'm doing this, I load it up in the DOSBox, I capture with DOSBox, or I load it into Windows, I capture with Fraps. I get the footage, it's done. PC games, not a problem. Solve that one, Don't have to worry about capture cards. Don't have to worry about PVRs. Don't have to worry about tapes. PC, it's done. You know, this Dirty Dancing, Johnny Mnemonic were really hard, and so I took out my copy that I had, which was actually a Windows 95 compatible copy. And I'm trying to remember. There was, I think there was a version that was compatible with XP, or at least I think the version I got. I'm trying to remember. I think the 95 version claimed it was compatible with like 98 or ME or something like that. And there's a README file on the disk that says we said it was, but we forgot, or so, like it's just really not. Don't try it. So. So I don't know where I was going with that. So I load this game up, and it ran. The Windows 95 version was more stable, but for some reason none of my capture software would get the gameplay footage. It would get the movies, but it wouldn't get. Every time I loaded into space, it just bombed. Like the capture footage bombed. It got nothing. So then all of a sudden I had this review written. I had no footage, and I'm like, well, shit. So I finally found out that there's a DOS version. I don't know how I got the Windows version, because I think I actually played the DOS version at first, but I collect a lot of games. I go to Bookman's a lot, and I get a lot of used games. So, you know, I've lost games, I've gained games. So the version I had was the Windows version, and I bought another version of the game. So I went and I bought the old DOS version again. So now I have 2 copies of Privateer. And I thought, my theory was that if I could load it in DOSBox, I could capture it that way. So it worked. It did work, although getting the timing right with DOSBox is usually pretty good about getting the speed right. You know, it's actually very dynamic that way, in that you can fine-tune the speed. But with this space flight, it was a buggy game to begin with. It crashed just continuously in Windows, and it was actually much more stable in Windows than in DOSBox, because it bombed in DOSBox all the time. And that's not saying DOSBox is bad. It bombed in MS-DOS all the fucking time. Like crazy, it bombed. And I was not exaggerating. I was not lying when I said it would bomb. Like, it wasn't like a consistent series of circumstances, or like, oh, every time I go in the booth it bombs. No, it would just... every time you change screens, it would find a way to bomb. You know, like option screens, loading screens, space flight. It would bomb in the middle of space flight for no reason, and it was really crazy. So you imagine trying to get footage for a game like this, you know, with this bomb crazy game. And actually, I'm amazed I got footage for it. I think this is the scene where I talk about the bad AI, where the AI is completely unable to kill me. And I was amazed. I actually had the footage running for, I think, 35 to 40 minutes. I literally walked away. I went outside to get some lunch, and I left this running. And when I came back, pardon me, the machine had still not killed me. I had sat perfectly still. I cut the thrusters, sat still, watched it for like 5 minutes as this thing only managed to drop my shields one time, and I just walked. And I don't know how you get away with that. That's Ducky from NCIS, by the way. You know, that very, very brief role in the very beginning. McCallum, I forget his name. Anyway, so that you'd think that would be like the litmus test for your AI, is like when you're testing your artificial intelligence, is can the ship hit a stationary target? And they could not. Now, that's not to say you can't die in this game, and I may have made it look a little easier than I meant to, because you do die a lot in this game. Although, the reason you tend to die a lot in this game is you very rarely are in a one-on-one situation. You tend to be surrounded by 3, 4, even 6 guys. And so even when those guys are accidentally hitting you, they're probably doing a lot of damage. And there are enemies in this game that are much easier than others. And I probably was facing one of the cupcake enemies. You know, the early pirates. I shouldn't say early, but some of the weaker pirates, they can't hurt you. You know, like at all, unless they are. I love that face, by the way, when the nurse is shot in the head. That was a great scene. The weaker pirates can't hurt you, but there are some characters, especially the military, but there are also some, I think the Kindred, or the Kyo ones also have like shuttles, or bigger like mid-class ships. And I remember, if those guys hit you even like once or twice, their guns were so powerful that even if you were flying the best ship in the game, like 1 or 2 hits would do you. It'd pretty much be over for you, like, immediately. And it was really kind of hard to balance that. Like, all of a sudden you'd be cruising through this game, just you would be this reaper of souls in this game, and all of a sudden this guy would just come along, charge you, and 2 shots later you're pate, and you're like, the fuck happened there, man? This clip from Desperado, I'm probably the only guy who ever got a clip of that, a chuckle out of that, just because I love that scene where I don't know why, but I just love seeing hear Cheech go, "Oh, that guy is pissed from Django," and I just love that line. I love Desperado, but the imbalance in the enemies, the complete ignorance as to who these enemies are. I still don't know. For all the detail that you're given in of the setting in the instruction books and all these clips, these guys have their own talking cadence, like their own grammar. You know, like they call each other Ser, like S-E-R, and women are Sarah. It's kind of almost like a medieval style way of addressing people, and they've got their own mannerisms and style of dress, and the FMVs do a really good job of throwing you into this really unfamiliar world, but at the same time doing it in such a casual but familiar way that you actually start to learn stuff. But when you're thrown into space, you know nothing. Like, you don't know who these pirates are. You don't know who the Kindred is. Not until, like, geez, you don't know who the Kindred are until like 3/4 of the way through the game, when you finally meet Christopher Walken and he tells you they're the mafia. But these guys, they just appear and they taunt you, and they want your stuff, and even if, like, they don't even leave you alone if you could give them your stuff. Like, they just want to kill you for no reason. They just see you and they want to kill you. In Privateer 1, there are guys who, they see you flying a merchant ship. You're always flying a merchant ship in that game, and they want to kill you for your cargo. And you're like, okay, fair enough. And actually, in some cases, you can appease them by giving them your cargo. I don't think in the original version of Privateer you could, but I think they patched it to where you could jettison cargo and they'd leave you alone. I think the Privateer remake, which actually I can't run, but I know that's the case in the Privateer remake, is you can appease people. Usually you could just do it by communicating with them and kind of surrendering. It wasn't great, but it kind of felt like you could talk your way out of a fight or run. You could actually run from a fight in Privateer 1. You cannot do that in this case, or at least not easily. I really don't think you can, because you run out of fuel like immediately. Fluffy rodents on that screen, by the way. The economics of this game were another thing that really, really frustrated me. Hey, Jurgen Prog, now you're in like half my reviews all of a sudden. I don't know. He's kind of drawn to these things. He's really good in the game. He's only there for like 5 minutes tops. Probably not even that much. Most of the big name actors that got in this are only in like 1 or 2 scenes. But just so many bad design decisions in this game where you have to hire wingmen, which that was not such a bad idea, being able to hire help, but having to hire cargo ships felt like such a drag. It was so freeing in Privateer 1 to be able to fly your own cargo. And what made it so much worse in this version was I don't know what it was, but the cargo dealing seemed so impersonal. You were given a ton of options, but at the same time, you really weren't given that many places to trade. You had like an agricultural planet, you had a prison planet, and you had a high-tech planet, and so it was kind of just like a rock, paper, scissors style of trading, where like you kind of just figured out like what one thing they wanted more than anything else after a little bit of trial and error, and that's all you ever traded them. You know, there was never any market fluctuation. There was never any change in prices, and what was worse was there really wasn't any point. You never made that much of a profit that it was worth your time. You know, you were just really putting yourself at great risk, especially since you were spending so much of your own money to hire ships that would often get destroyed just by leaping out ahead of you and getting destroyed without you. So it just wasn't worth your time, and besides that, you could pretty much finish the game with the starting ship. I did. You can buy new ship. I think I bought like one slightly better ship with payments I made for missions, but really I just bought better like a better power plant so I could fire more. So it was really hard to describe how this game is bad. I mean, like, oh, the enemies can't kill you, but you die all the time. You know, it was kind of funny that way, where there were times when the game couldn't kill you even when it was trying, and at the same time this game was just crushingly frustrating and annoying to play. And what I'm getting to is the fact that there were these kind of just an infinite cycle of enemies that would keep appearing at a jump point. It was kind of weird. I mentioned that this thing couldn't kill me with 40 minutes of trying, and I in hindsight, I kind of kicked myself for not explaining, I think, accurately, like, well, if new bad guys are jumping in all the time, how come new bad guys weren't jumping in to this fight? And actually, I don't know. What's kind of funny is when you're in a really pitched battle, new bad guys would keep jumping in to replace bad guys who left. And so I think actually what was going on in this game is that there's like a maximum number of ships that can be at a nav point, right? So let's just say it's 6. So if there's 6 bad guys around a jump point and you kill one, and all of a sudden the game reaches its trigger where it's going to teleport in, if there's not the maximum number of guys in, it leaves it alone. But if it's short of that number, new bad guys will jump in. So I still have no idea the timing or the reasoning between who jumps in, why, and when. But for some reason, there was like 4 friendly ships just kind of chilling near the nav point, not moving. And I had actually strayed away from the nav point enough that the pirate was focused solely on me. So in case you think like, the pirate was diverting its fire between you and the merchants, and that's why it wasn't killing you. No. It was on me. It was on me the entire time. Those friendly ships you're seeing on the radar are so far away as to not even be a match. You know, it wasn't even registering on the enemy artificial intelligence. No, it was on me. So I don't know why there weren't any other ships coming in. I just think that there was like a maximum, and that's why nobody else came in. And I do mean all the time. You could be you could be cruising through missions, no problem. Like, you can run through entire storyline missions without facing any resistance whatsoever, no problem. And some cases, like every single jump point, you meet resistance. I mean, like stiff resistance to crazy amounts of enemies. And in some cases, you can just get mired at a jump point basically forever. You know, this just, you keep killing bad guys and new guys jump in. Or you kill bad guys, your escort ship jumps out ahead of you, then bad guys jump in, preventing you from jumping out, and you can't escape. And that's why Privateer 1 was so much better, because you could run, you could escape. And this is another bit I cut out, but I describe how much more thrilling it is in Privateer 1, being able to turn tail and run, especially when you really don't want to kill some people. Like there are times when you're smuggling drugs or stuff like that, and you're trying to run military blockades, and the one thing you don't want to do in the Privateer 1 is piss off the military, because that means every time you're actually encountering like military warships, which are leagues above the class of pirate ships that you're facing. Like, these are the actual like frontline warships, you know, so you don't want to make them mad. So, you know, running is really a good idea a lot of times. So when you're jumping in, in Privateer 1, the jump points are signified by this gigantic blue cloud. So to jump out, all you have to do is have enough gas and fly into the blue cloud, hit J. Your jump engine takes like 6 to 8 seconds to power up, and then you leave. And during those 6 to 8 seconds, you are vulnerable to attack. And so when you're trying to run a blockade, it was this really thrilling thing where you're trying to run through these ships at top speed. The military ships are faster than you, so they're still like just jackhammering you. You leap into the cloud, you punch it, your jump drive starts to power up, and you cut to this exterior shot of your ship just being like surrounded by this swarm of bad guys who are just trying to blow your ass up before your jump drive activates. And so you're like just hold together. You know, you're very Han Solo in there, where you're like, hear me, baby, hold together. So you'll finally jump out, you celebrate, you throw your arms up in the air, you go, yes, I made it. And then like when you reappear in the system, you're like, God knows what's on the other side. It could be another military checkpoint, in which case you are fucked. But it was really exciting to figure out, you know. And so it was always really fun jumping out, getting just hammered, and then like taking a survey, like your damage report, just opening up your damage computer and just weeping. You're like, oh my god, they fucked up my ship. Because you had to pay for your own repairs, and that was also something that was really awesome in that game, was you had to fix your own ship. So like, it was a lot more personal when it was your ship that you had to fix, depending on what jobs you wanted to take. If it was going to run through a lot of ordnance, like if you, especially if you were like big into missiles, guided missiles were really expensive. Torpedoes, which are unguided, were a lot cheaper. So like, I really prided myself on being a really good shot with the torpedoes, which were a lot cheaper and more powerful if you could hit with them. So I got to be a really crack shot with the torpedoes. Privateer is a successor to a game called Elite, which, from what I understand, is a much more primitive game, at least graphically. In terms of the economic simulations, like the rise and fall, booms and busts of the economic trade, Elite is probably way above Privateer. Because for all I complain about Privateer not going through like booms and busts and fluctuating prices, the prices do fluctuate, but not a whole lot in Privateer. It was just a really simple version, and it just felt a lot better, you know. But Elite, I never played that game, amazingly enough, and you'd think I would have, because it's right up my alley, that kind of game. I should actually check it out. A few friends of mine have highly suggested the X3 series of games, which are very good. I think I don't like X3, and I've played a couple of them for a couple reasons. Number one being the latest X3 game. I forget what it's called. I have it on the shelf somewhere. It has a bunch of Securom copy protection, and it really makes me nervous. I do not like that kind of copy protection, especially when it asks you, like, we're going to install this shit on your computer. Is that okay? And I go, no. But that's not why I don't like X3. It's really just personal preference. They're very good games. In fact, very, very expertly crafted games with a lot of complexity. Tons of complexity, actually. It's probably the most complex space simulator and economic simulator I have ever seen.
This is your crusade, Hussein.
So much so that the game is actually intimidating as all hell to get playing. That game scares me. There is so much to that game. Just in terms of all the things you can do in your ship, all the things you didn't even know you could do. Like I love Privateer because of its freedom. X3 is freedom. It's like the ultimate space sandbox. You can jump out of your ship in a spacesuit, float around, and commandeer other ships that people have ejected from. You can slave rig ships to your own and have them follow you and go do their own things autonomously. And in fact, that is pretty much the goal of X3, is being able to master the concept of making your ships autonomous and giving them directions to act independently of you. Because I think the main point of X3, from what I've played, is not necessarily to be a good pilot or be a really good like one-on-one space smuggler or a trader or something like that. It is to establish a financial empire. By that I mean is you're hoping to raise enough money to buy small merchant ships and set up. You can actually set up like
These guys deserved
artificial intelligence cycles of supply and demand, where you can actually like vertically integrate your entire financial empire, like being able to, like, let's say you want to sell graham crackers or something like that. You can set up a ship to go to an agricultural planet and harvest the resources necessary. You can send them to your own processing plant to make the graham crackers for essentially no cost, and then you can sell the graham crackers at commercial planets. And so you control like every means of production, and you have ships and stations that do all of these things, and you have hired actually ships to protect your factories and stuff like that. So you really are like creating this empire. And so you do this whole thing the entire time. Brian Blessed, my God, what are you doing, man? But yeah, when you start to get beyond, like, the space simulation is complex enough on its own and really well done. And really difficult to get, by the way. So, you know, you could spend, like, I spent 2 days just trying to figure out all the stuff I could do in the ship. And then I kind of think what's funny is you're meant to be able to play this game. I think the ideal scenario for this game is being able to just dock at a station, not leave, and delegate responsibility to the artificial intelligence ships along the way in X3. So it's kind of clever that way, where you kind of promote yourself to an office job. And I don't know if I'd play that way. I should actually get back to it just to play the storyline mode, because apparently it's pretty good. But I would just play as a pilot if I could. It's kind of hard to escape the trading commodity stuff and the whole trading empire aspect of it, because it really is, I don't want to say forced on you, but it is a huge part of that game. And so when you're ignoring it, it feels like you're ignoring kind of the point of the game. I don't know. Enough about X3. I should actually talk about the game. Oh, that reminds me. I don't know if I credited them in the credits. I can't say credited them in the credits. But I mentioned that I found a website that had all of these clips from basically a high, for this time, a high definition kind of master source tape. At least I think it is. Because this is far and away much better quality than the videos you see in the game. No, you guy power. Sorry, where was I? I love that scene. No. The video on this tape was way better than anything in the game, because it was all interlaced and shit and low quality, small size. This was big size. I love this scene. This was so messed up. I couldn't believe it. You can see his head deflate too. It ruptures. Ooh, no. It was really messed up. I can't. That's actually kind of grisly, man. That's unusual. Yeah. I can't actually say I've ever seen something like that happen in a game. Anyway, the website I found the footage on was the Wing Commander CIC. You could probably Google Wing Commander CIC and find it. It's kind of it's a very comprehensive site with everything Wing Commander involved. Now, you can't download games from there or anything, although you probably could find like eBay listings if you're interested in finding that stuff. But they have a lot of footage and like music videos and like what do you call them? I can't remember the music videos you make based on like anime footage and OAVs, I think. But yeah, it's a very informative source, if nothing else. There were actually a lot of Wing Commander games that were kind of inferior, like Academy and Armada, which I think were mainly made just as a kind of a mission builder, kind of based on the Wing Commander 2 framework, the space simulation aspect of it. They were not that good. But I really do love the Wing Commander series. I would just stick to the core storyline. Just go from like 1 to 4 and then do Prophecy. And just see how you like him. This was a really bizarre scene. This mining guy has this big, like, old man's horn for deafness that he sticks in his ear. And then he just starts rooting around in his pants for like 45 seconds. A really strange scene. Love these video clips, though. Like I said, when I saw this on the tape, I couldn't believe it. I was like, was this game really as bad as I remember? Because the video clips are actually really, really good. Problem with these was you never saw most of these clips because almost all of these missions are hidden. You had to activate your SOS receiver to get most of these missions. So it's really about half the game that you missed out on if you just stuck to the main storyline. Anyway, I can't believe I have actually talked through this entire thing, but thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.